Welcome to Team DataFam meeting number 54. This TUG aims to capture all the in-person and unrecorded presentations so we can actually bring them out to a wider audience. So if there's any presentations from larger conferences or smaller meetings, or if someone's never presented before, everyone's welcome here. We'll find a spot for you. Just email me at team.datafam@gmail.com and we can find somewhere that suits you and me. And obviously all the meetings are recorded, put on YouTube and on a podcast. You'll see some details about that at the end. But today we have Celia presenting on a technical interview, your technical interview go-to-market for position, perform, and landing the role. So some practical tips. She's got a few links she'll put in the chat as well, but I'll hand it over to you and you can take it from here.
Thank you guys for joining in tonight. This is actually a presentation that I've given quite a few times over the last several years. And I wanted to give you a little preview about my experience first to kind of give you a little bit of insight on why it is I even have such strong opinions, because this is something I am very passionate about, and you're gonna quickly hear why. So, and like Chris said, very open to having questions, come into chat. This is usually an interactive session that I run. So, but let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to go over to my presentation deck, because I usually don't do this part. As people often know me, because I will come out of an immersive with them or be part of their training path. So I started off as a network systems engineer, software developer, took a detour through care of elder parents, children. That was a day trader through that, sports coach of every kind, plugged the holes at all the schools. And then as I was coming back into being more able to work full-time in the industry, analytics really caught my attention, and in particular, helping people like pivot out of whatever situation they were in, be data adjacent or not data adjacent, and jump in. And this is mid-teen, so I had seen Tableau at work, and then also been fascinated by it, helped do some troubleshooting, and then got comfortable with it. And then it was part of the suite of things I was asked to teach. So as of last summer, about June timeframe, I had crossed over about 7,000 adults who were pivoting into analytics, some flavor of analytics, from the scope of data cleaning all the way through data science, data engineering kind of positions. And so that gives you kind of an idea of my scope of interest as well. And so along with that, I ended up in some unique projects. All right, so by 2019, I got to go to Saudi Arabia and work alongside of a team that was, the mission that had been given by the prince at the time was asking them to become leaders in data like they were leaders in oil, right? So I had several classes that were 30 people each, or 30 something, but there were like 300 people that had applied for it. And it was very competitive. We did a lot of Python programming and data analytics that scoped from Excel, SQL, and Tableau was the finishing visual analytics tool. So same kind of deal with Avado and SkillsGap, UK-based people trying to get into analytics. The next chunk here in 2020 was where I was working with a big bootcamp company that was trying to help people get to market and in their enterprise side of their house. So people were on stipends and making a pivot, then data adjacent kind of jobs trying to come into, and that was right, on the tail end of COVID here. And so did a couple of quarters of that sort of circumstance. And all this I'm saying is about when people are coming from one industry to another, we have to do a lot of different types of preparation to help them be successful in apply and even getting a chance to share and express their skills, right? So that's why we're going to talk a little bit more about portfolio work and the ways you can prep and other ways you can add credentials to your resume, because you have to have something that helps people believe that you can do the work for them, right? So Talent Path and these other icons here at the end were very much the hire, train, deploy, retain, train, deploy, and then also my last batch of people I prepared to go to a certain hiring circumstance. They were going to work at PayPal. So I'm trying always to bring to this conversation whatever is the latest and greatest conversations that have happened as I've helped people go get those jobs. Now, sidebar, I also have some university experience at this point. So I've been teaching at University of San Francisco for 3 years. So I'm seeing not necessarily all young people, but younger people and some that are refreshing their skills, right? So I'm seeing that perspective. And the thing they asked me in to come in and do was to help them prepare for internships. So again, all about getting to market, right? So even though it's the SQL, Visual, Tableau, Quarter, principles of data analytics, which we always focus on the metrics to what is it going to take, what are we measuring, what matters, those sort of things. So that is my university experience, alongside of another unique project where I spent the winter of 23-24 in the Bahamas, helping with a project where the ambassador had offered to rebuild the middle class, and to do that, they were trying to help people move into data jobs, because there's kind of was a division there of a lot of hospitality and service related jobs, and then kind of a skip to the next level of what functions people even had the natural paths and develop trainings available to even get into. So had a 100% graduation of that group. Everybody had a internship on the backside of it waiting for them, but they all had to interview and qualify. So again, looking at that, what is it going to take to get someone's attention and make them believe that you can do the job? So let me pop over to my other deck. So that leads us to the tech interview, because for sure, and this is, I may need to stop this for just a second to get this to switch. Chris, 1 second. There we go. Okay, should see a blue screen. Okay, great. All right, so this is going to take us into the preparation that people needed to do to get into a tech interview, to be successful with the technical interview cycle that would go for a technical job, right? So not project management, but more like data analytics and on down that continuum of things that can happen. So I was asked initially to create this webinar to talk about the typical interview loop and talk about the different types of challenges and assessments that would be given. In this particular deck, I have a preview of what you would see if you were authoring a code signal test, which is a very popular tool, at least in the US, for asynchronous testing of people's coding skills. And then we learned along the way that, so I was head of learning and development for a company that was a hire, train, deploy for all of 21. And we were so successful that they sold the company and they already had a head of L&D. So in any case, as we were having people interview and prepare for jobs, there were so many times where the questions didn't align with what the specification for the job was. And so we learned a lot about how to help people prepare to navigate those. And I have some recommendations along that. So and for better for worse, SQL still is the way in the door for a lot of analytics jobs, because there's still a devotion to the thought, anyhow, that you probably need to be able to manipulate data as you come in to do potentially even visual analytics. So, so I have a collection of recommendations and just thoughts, hopefully something fresh for you to consider as you head into that. So I always like to begin with the end in mind here. So some TLDR from my personal network. So knowing that I have this on my calendar on a regular basis, I try to always sit every month with at least 1 or 2 hiring managers and at least 2 or 3 people, maybe former students, maybe not former students, who have gotten jobs. And so I always like to summarize some of the things that we found to be current changes, because, of course, over the years, the market changes. Gen AI has changed things tremendously this last year in particular. But so kind of the bottom line on some of that thinking is that networking is becoming such an important part of anyone's strategy that's needing a job. And while there's often a temptation to kind of withdraw with us, if you find yourself unemployed or laid off, you really need to press in. And Tableau user groups are just got to be one of the very best ways to get in, serve, be a part of a community that's vibrant and willing to go to. It's amazing what people will do for each other in the DataFam. I sat with one of my former colleagues who's now a recruiter at Meta, and this has been echoed repeatedly in others. But the thing about being the first to apply, they get about 1,000 resumes per hour, no matter what the job posting is at Meta. And she was talking to me about how that the resources they're using to sift through and evaluate, and she was just almost heartbroken about how that that she's certain they're leaving really well qualified people behind, but they just have such a volume. So if you can get in the front of that, it used to be we could see a post, and I'll think about that a little bit. No, if you need to have your materials kind of ready to go. So you see a post, tune them to it and hit go, because there's just so much noise in the paper war. That's what I like to call it. Person to person has become best again. I was listening to one of my other colleagues talk about, so I think there was somebody at IBM that was talking about that they only want to do interviews for people who are internally referred, because the volume of paper and normalization that Gen AI has given everybody, the distinctions between the type of letters and the words that are being used and all, some of that is being normalized in a way that really takes the human out of it. So it's not as easy to spot those great candidates from that side. So the person-to-person connection is going to be huge again, folks. And so being ready with use cases. Now, this came out of an interview, several interviews, but one in particular that I also sat in myself on. I was like, I'm always kind of fishing for what's out there, and got into the tech interview round in a Walmart job. I know it's going to sound funny, but it is true, because I have family that lives in Arkansas and thought that would be fun. And anyway, so the person was walking through a business process that they had just experienced, and was trying to throw me curveballs all the way along about how would you handle this, how would you handle that. So, being ready not only with the soft skills questions, but also a really detailed, what tool would you use to do this, and how would you handle that, and those sort of questions makes for a more lively interview, and also was I thought was a refreshingly good way to be asking the questions. So another thing that we've come across that I really strongly recommend is a link that I will put into the chat, and that is a resource. Let's find my chat. Okay, here we go. All right, this is a YouTube video that arguably is meant more toward potentially coding strategies, except when we were sending the folks to PayPal, they were asked to do whiteboard coding sessions. Has anybody ever done a whiteboard coding session? I'd be curious to see in chat. If you've been asked to do one of those, if you would just make a note in chat, I would be glad to see that. Okay, great, good, yes. So you know what I'm talking about then. For anyone who's not faced that, it is, we're pretty comfortable. I feel like I'm pretty comfortable if I have an editor there and I have a chance to test and see what the database has, and then I can do a little, small query to verify or validate. No, this is where you have a whiteboard and they tell you a task, and then you need to step through writing the code for it. And so this Reacto method is really awesome at keeping it more conversational, and then also giving you a chance to demonstrate your logic and demonstrate your skills without it just rising and falling on, did you get the ultimate answer correct? Because it's about, so many times we have, here I am with my Southern accent here talking to you guys, and I just want to acknowledge that sometimes can be difficult. But even English to English, we have lots of different ways we say our words. And so repeating a question back to somebody is never going to be seen as disrespectful. In fact, it's just going to be emphasizing the fact that when you're an analyst for them, that you're going to ask and verify that you've heard what you've been asked. So always you want to start with something like that, giving examples, describing your approach, and then going to the coding after you've already kind of gone through that. That's my C. And then testing it. A couple of the examples he'll talk about in this little video is like he'll write out to the side what the starting value would be if there was a key variable that you were working on, and then how this process is going to change that. In SQL, it would be talking about how the table would be modified by what it was you were asking it to do. So it just is a fresh way to think about whiteboarding in particular. So that's a newer deal where people are more and more having to do that, and I really encourage you to practice that, because it can be unsettling if you're expecting to be able to have some sort of situation where you have something you can test against. Yeah, agreeing, because they have a method that they consider better. Yes, and I imagine so. So there's a lot of room for that to be, I would say, unnecessarily aggravating, and you want to make sure that you turn it into a conversation and you do your very best to give the person a chance to hear your logic and hear your strategies that you'd employ, just in case you don't scratch that one single itch that they had in mind on that. So, all right, so I'm gonna back up for a little bit and kind of walk through a little bit more of the interview loop. What are the managers looking for? I am going to talk about Gen AI and then also have specific recommendations on resources. So what are the hiring managers looking for? I used this slide when we were preparing the folks to go to PayPal, and I wanted you to just, as we go into interviews, there's so much on the line, right? For all of us, we go into interviews, there's so much on the line. And so I think that it's important for you to take a moment before you go into that moment and think about when you hired somebody or you bartered for services with someone. What were your priorities in making that decision? Is there anything that you weighed heavier or less? And then did the person meet your expectations? And then what would you do differently next time? Maybe you're a person that hires out services a lot, and you have very quick, ready, set, go answers for that. I think sometimes it's too easy for us to think about ourselves in the receiving end of that and not like consider what's on the other side of it. And the thing that it was the takeaway to my folks I was preparing when I had the conversation on the slide the first time was you have to be sure that you nail the things you have control over. So like the being on time, the answering the questions asked, some of those sort of things. And whatever you've considered this person to be faithfully successful on doing what you asked them to do, that easily translates over into an interview circumstance and can give you kind of a little bit fresh thinking on what it is we're going to be doing as we prepare and interact with them. So the ultimate interview goal, I would argue all day long that the ultimate interview goal is that they are trying to assess you for what is the organizational cost to get you to productivity and what's the distance there, right? And then also do they like wanting to work with you? So but that distance is what they're trying to measure. And so there's a lot of thought and tools and techniques applied to what is the distance between where you are today and what you need to do to be productive in their environment. And there's YouTube videos about the 10x coder these days. I mean, it's like, and then these are things that are normally happening in 30-minute increments or unfortunately, and lots of times. So it's really such a quick assessment that often is happening. So critical things to have on hand. This is probably going to be obvious, but I want to be sure that it's being said anyhow. You want to be sure that you've aligned whatever your resources are to the job that's being posted for, right? So I would call it tuning. So you need to research the tech stack of the persons that you're going to be interviewing with and make sure that those things are prominently shown, because there's way too many parts and pieces in our industry to always have all of it out there and make it sound credible. So making sure that your online presence and between like your LinkedIn, your portfolio sign, that they align, that they're saying the same kind of messaging, and then any kind of showcased work product that you have available that's not under NDA or some sort of proprietary circumstance, make sure that it's visible, because anything you can do to have independent showcasing and referencing of what you're capable of will serve you well. You got to be sure that it maps to their tech stack, or that you've focused on the few things that are going to be mapped to their tech stack. Having some responses ready to go on those high frequency soft skills questions. We've gone through a couple cycles in the last few years where it was always about what's your greatest accomplishment? What are you most proud of? And then somewhere in COVID, we flipped the script to where, what was the most embarrassing thing? What failed? How did you dig out of that? So like we've gone through a couple cycles of the positive questions and then the negative questions. And it seems like now we're like flipping the script back where people are trying to ask fresher questions, but you need to be aware of whatever is being talked about in that space a lot, and then have ready, set, go answers on it. So you want to sound thoughtful, reflective a little bit, but have a ready answer for it. And this is not the time to be super shy or it's not being arrogant or pompous about it. It's to be right-minded about the things that went well. And you'll be better received if you can say, and this is why it was successful. This was the return on investment, or this was the outcome, or this was the time saved, or this was the revenue that was produced. So something that is a measured result is going to always come off stronger. Or someone didn't quit their job, because the hiring cost these days and then the replacement cost of people is substantial. We used to have a metric that we used, and this one is really outdated, but if you take someone's salary and you add about 28% to it, it's at least that, if not more, on the cost to the organization to get that person in place and to keep them. And so the gap of a missing body is usually not that is a cost to them as well. Having external credentials like HackerRank or some sort of vendor certification is going to be strong. I will tell you that I feel like those right now are not as well received as they have been, but it's still anything that says like in third-party gospel about your credentialing, your capabilities. Also, when you have fresh things happening on your profile, it also communicates that you're a lifetime learner. And analytics, if nothing else, is not for the weak at heart on anyone wanting to have it be the same way all the time, because one of the most guaranteed things about analytics is that it's changing. We are always in a state of change. And that's part of what makes it fun as well. But you have to be that personality that's okay with that. So let's move on to the interview loop and what you might expect there. And it does depend. Okay, so what does it depend on? Well, it depends on a bunch of stuff, right? And the size of the company is going to make a big difference. Whether or not you see the hiring manager right up front and they're managing the process, or if it's way to the back end of it. Well, and also the budget. Is a recruiter being used? And what does that cost the business there? The recruiter could be an internal person or an external person that may make them a friend or a foe. You probably want to follow the money on that one. The available bandwidth. This one was a real pain point for me, particularly when I was head of L&D at the Hire, Train, Deploy company, because the tech interviews are invariably done by people who are doing the work. Okay, they're not professional interviewers, and they're also usually really busy and often a little frustrated to be being pulled off of their regular work assignments to help out with this, even if they're excited that there's somebody coming in to give them a hand, because you won't be the only one that they got pulled off for their work assignments for, right? So if you keep in mind that they're rushed, they're not professional interviewers, and that even if they are excited that there's going to be a new person on board, you got to just wear extra thick skin that day and know that this may be, the communication may not be the best or optimal. And sometimes I've heard of some of my students in particular coming back and talking about how that it's almost like the roughness of the interview was a test in and of itself. At the Hire, Train, Deploy, the folks would give these questions rapid fire, doing a technical assessment, trying to get through as many questions as possible, and would interrupt the students that my students turned consultant. And they would be like, if you got it right, you would even get cut off even faster. So like, you really can't take that personally. You got to let it be about them. And it could be a million other things that are causing them to be one way or the other, right? So just want to draw that, put a big emphasis on that. The other thing is the live or asynchronous coding tests that are happening. That's going to give them insight on what you're like under pressure. I'm going to talk about more about that in a minute. And the urgency of the need. Now, have the shoes been empty for a while? If not, don't forget that this is an evaluation from your side of the table as well. So if they've been empty for a while, you need to find out, even if you really need the job, you need to find out why. There may be a reason there that may be something that you don't want to necessarily sign up for. Back to my Walmart example, what I found out there was that it was actually 3 jobs, 3 really distinct different disciplines wrapped into one job and underpaid. So, sometimes there's a reason. The organizational preferences, you got to be careful about this one from the point of view of, is it disguised free work and what's happening there? So I have had a couple of students be literally taken advantage of the kind of stuff that happens in interview cycles. But in any case, hopefully that's not the case most of the time. So the common interview loop, we definitely have buzzword bingo. We get to play first, and then we get into something that is going to screen us in or out, right? And most of the time, it's at least one, but often these days, more than one of these 3 that are in blue. The technical phone screen, the take-home remote challenge or a take-home challenge of some kind, and then that live coding, sometimes whiteboard possibility. And then passing that, unless you're with a smaller firm where you got to meet the hiring manager at first, which I feel like is such an advantage, and then you would be passed on to the hiring manager, and then be looking at more of that. Is this person a good fit? The cultural fits go either one and done or large, depending on the size of the organization. And I'm sure you guys have heard the stories too. So that good fit thing is kind of funny, and also just remarkable how serious people are taking that these days. And because, you know, it's a big process and it's a big commitment, to be sure. So splitting out these blue sections, though, I want to talk about that a little bit more. The technical phone screen, you keep in mind that that person is often working off of a brief that is not necessarily their language, right? So they're looking for ways to say yes or no to you and your match against the brief. So you need to make sure that you're also asking them good questions if you're not understanding what they're asking you to say or validate. The walking through a portfolio pieces resoundingly over and over have heard this having very positive outcomes with students and people who are pivoters coming in to demonstrate what they could have done, and you know, you're painting that picture of what you could do for them, right? Along the lines of portfolios, anything you can do where you're handling real world data. This is always a pet peeve of mine in any class I've ever taught, because we need to have people who are needing to be mimicking real world problems and handling real world data. So there's scrapes from Airbnb, inside Airbnb, there's scrapes from every bike share on the earth, just about. You need to find data that is sizable. Anything, you know, like 1 million or 2 rows is better. And then, yes, there's problems with that, okay, but that's the point. So you want to have your portfolio be in the domain of where your primary interest is. There are LLMs these days that will generate fake data sets that are just a lot more precise and on point. And Adam Miko, I believe, is one of the guys in the DataFam that's doing a good job with that. So please, for your portfolio pieces, make sure that they are correlated to the target, and make sure that they are showing your bench strength. That leaves us with the remote take-home challenge and the coding challenges. In my circles, the take-home challenge has been less these days, but in the event that you get one of those, you got to be careful about a couple of things. Make sure you understand what the time budget was that was intended for that, okay? And that, even if you decide to do more, that's going to tell you something about what they're expecting in terms of speed of work and return on investment of their time. And then know that there's more than likely some sort of Easter egg tucked in there somewhere, all right? The coding challenges can take lots of different forms. We've talked a little bit about the whiteboarding one, but up until whiteboarding became such a popular one to use, we had live with a proctor, where you would have somebody often on screen with you. There was a big house here in Austin that would frequently do this with folks, where you'd be doing a SQL coding challenge. The instructions would be there, but there'd be a person in a bubble above top right. And you got to make careful that you don't take whatever that person is doing. They're probably working on their own work, and personalize it. All right. So one of my favorite students was really down after his experience with this, and he was really, really good with SQL, but he just sort of like melted when he was in this pressure cooker. And he said, that person was scowling at me the whole time. Like, I don't think she was probably even looking at you. She was mad that she's got pulled off her job, you know, but you just can't take it, you know, whatever you can do to toughen your field of view, focus like a laser, don't take it personal. I'm hearing a theme song here, y'all. But that is common on some of on some of those tests, to make sure that you're not doing something beyond the scope of what they've asked you to do. So the asynchronous ones with code signal, that absolutely can be recorded, usually is recorded. I used it a lot in 2021. I'm going to show you what the author side looks like in a minute. You know, any asynchronous questions you get, they have to be timely. You have to be on time or early with it. And if you have any sort of another version of this, is where you have to explain or debug code that someone else has written. All right. So these are all things you could practice before you have to get in that circumstance. So I'll be curious, is there any other, I'm going to find where my chat went off to, any other Anybody else had a coding test recently where they've done something out of the scope? All right. Well, I'm sure that there are more choices out there, but let's keep going here. Okay. So code signal from the author's side of the screen. So this part of the reason I recommend HackerRank to a lot of my students is because the same kind of frame here. You see that? This is what it would look like from a student's point of view or assessor's point of view, taking the assessment. I mean, assessee, I guess that would be. So you have some instructions, top left. You have input outputs, usually described to bottom left. The top center is where you're going to be doing your coding, and the bottom is where you're going to be being able to see results from your runs. Now, this version of Code Signal has the trial runs separated from submit. So you have a minute there to do some of that evaluation to make sure that you're on track with what's being asked, right? Notice also that this particular version of Code Signal, we had, usually we would have a couple different versions of either Python or SQL that people could select from because, it's, people can switch out song sheets more than they can switch out. I mean, a dialect of SQL over here or there was absolutely fine. Just be sure and know what's possible and what the options are so that you don't get stuck in something that you're feeling boxed in, okay? From my side of the screen, and this is one of the things this is one of the main screens we'd manage these tests from, where I would see who had taken it, the time spent. Now, there was always a score that was given. I found this to not be very helpful from the Code Signal side. They didn't score it no matter how much time we spent tuning our testing alignment, from the scoring was not so great, but in any case, it is there. So you are up against that. There's a similarity score here given for out there in the database of code signals everywhere. Does it look like everybody else's? Well, this is also important, but also potentially not important, depending on the type of coding that you've been given, where if it's some popular code test that is a pattern we all teach and do, then of course it's going to look similar. So, but in any case, then we also had a link over to the test itself. And so that would pop up like this. And this is where I used to spend most of my time. I would kind of bypass that first screen and come to here because I got to see how people use their time. And that to me, like, I needed to know how adaptable they were, how they were going to manage their time, if they were going to, how did they handle stuff that was too hard for them? That was another big one, right? So again, some of the key factors here, the amount of time that was spent, the score, the plagiarism. Now, plagiarism, in my circumstance, we told people do not use outside resources. Only give us what you know and use comment code for something that you don't know. And you'd be surprised, even with that written and said and repeated, we still have people that would like all of a sudden copy and paste. You can see it when it copy and pastes in, because see this little business right here, that is a replay of the video of people taking the test. So I got really great at spotting, it's pretty obvious. All of a sudden the code is, oh, whoa, it was all there. And now they're changing variable names, so be careful to what is allowed. Sometimes, the rules will change from place to place, but I also wanted to know if I could trust them. So that was a problem. Now, another big thing about this thing is I love this histogram. And this particular example we found to include in this deck is ideal, because to me, what this says is the person came in here, started on the first one, and then sized up the task at hand. All right, do you see that? That is lovely, because to me, that is somebody who's going to have not only the ability to dive in, but a little bit more peripheral vision, which is so helpful. And then look at the time that was spent and how it was spent going through, circle back through at the end. I mean, this person, I would be very keen to even if the score wasn't great, I'm learning something about their working behavior here and how they break things down and tackle them. And so, you just don't know what people are taking away on the other side of the screen, but that for me would be great. Even though the person did not finish this ending one, the allocation of time, the diligence and staying with it, the way they broke it down. Do you see what, you just don't know on the other side what is happening, but you got to know some words of caution is with this as well, because just like I showed you, there was a video of me watching them code that in here. You got to clarify what resources are allowed to be used, right? So, because I was very keen to find out what was in their mind. And the person that actually was my first and best out of the gate, out of this, when I was new in that job, She absolutely bombed her code signal test, but her logic was strong. Her code that she left behind there was great. Her interviews that had happened as she was coming in were very strong. And then we decided she was a worthy risk. Turned out we were correct. There's so much more than just did you get the bottom answer right. And if you're interviewing with somebody who's evaluating it only on the bottom answer, that may need to represent a cause to pause for you. So okay, so cautions, right? Clarify the resources you're allowed to use. If you are told original work only, be so careful not to copy paste. Even if you're using something that's a model, even if it's something you've written before, none of us write from top to bottom, I don't think. I'm around a lot of coders. You build a frame, you fill some stuff out, you build, and there's a process involved that is not a sequential and certainly not a automatically there and change variable names, right? So you need to practice being in time box query writing mode. So whatever that's going to be, HackerRank, Code Signal now has practice environment. There's a lot of places where you can practice that. Mode Analytics has a good environment as well, but trying to make sure that you can sit down and quickly crank something out. That's going to be really important. Showing your pseudocode and your logic, showing your logic in your pseudocode for unknown parts or pieces, that will go a long ways. If the people are really looking for that mindset, then that's going to be important. And then just confidently showing your work. Interviews are set up to make you, because of the revealing nature, by default, we tend to feel a little bit like, oh, I could have done better or something. Well, of course, that's always the case. So we always talked a lot about the benefit of the doubt principle as well, BOD. Some overly difficult questions may have other purposes. And one of my very favorite, this guy is more of a coder than an analyst, but one of his more recent job interviews I was writing along with him on, he got into the interview, and they told him to prepare for a couple of specific toolings. Got there, and it was not those but different. And then he had to kind of like figure it out, scramble in the moment. Got some of it done, didn't get some of it done. Was very disappointed about how he'd done, and got the job. So the point was not about could you do this. And then we asked them, I got to ask the owner of the company later about why did you do this to him? And he goes, well, we knew he already knew this other stuff. We needed to see how adaptable he was. I'm like, well, there you go. So he just, and they didn't have any malice about it. They just were trying to see, how would he do if he was not prepared for that one thing. So it can be it can be an interesting moment. So take home, I think I saw a comment about some of the take home things earlier. One recently gave a small set of tables on screen. I see you, Devin. Yeah, good. Yeah, the take homes are, at least in the U.S., in the southern, I don't know. My students are pretty much international, but this is the feedback I mostly get is mostly U.S. based right now. We're not seeing as many take home projects, and the projects we are seeing are more less broad sweeping kind of thing. So the encouragement still remains. You need to get clarity on exactly what they're asking for. These take home projects can really get some of us that are perfectionists or completionists, we can go really hard and long with this and really overdo them. You got to be careful about that as well, because they want you to, from a business point of view, you want to balance the amount of effort with what's being asked, because at work, people aren't necessarily looking for all the beautiful everything. They're wanting you to take their time and their money and invest it in appropriate. So appropriate investment is something that also is revealed, at least in part, in how you handle these sort of things. So look for the Easter eggs and the spoilers. Know that there's going to be some feature about a take home that will mirror their work environment. So that'll be good for you to learn. And just be mindful of the disguised as free consulting part, and feel free to, after a certain point, go, this is, they're all maybe testing you if you've got any boundaries, right? So that's going to be important. All right, so that takes me to the question about what about Gen AI, right? And my answer is yes. And I'm amused these days when I bump into people where it's even necessarily much of a conversation, but just for the sake of argument, I'm going to just say you need to be doing as much as you can in generative Gen AI. And I always, especially to my university students, encourage these three things. You need to be a great prompt engineer and be that kind of prompt engineer that can write a very comprehensive question to any engine that you're asking a question to, so that you get as close to your target as possible. I have circumstances I can point to where we've used one engine to ask it what we should be asking the other engine, depending on what we were doing. That was so important, right? So especially for coding solutions, we can be build your prompt over here to get it to work better over here. I mean, there's just so much possibility here, but really and truly, prompt engineering has to be something that is almost second nature, where you're thinking in terms of very complete, fulsome questions to get it to give you the best answer possible. Know that the right tool for the task is also very much on task right now. When we used to say that 4 years ago, we meant whether or not you should use a spreadsheet or a visual analytics tool or a small database or a big commercial database. So that's not what we're meaning right now. Right now, right tool for the task is often which version of Gen AI are you going to use for the task that you're trying to do? Because there's so many ones that are available now with lots of different specialty characteristics and features and abilities. All right. Don't let go of your domain expertise though, and don't let that suffer, because you are still the guardian of the output and you're held accountable for the output. So I'm just amazed. I have a big subscription to ChatGPT right now, and the amount of times that it's wrong about Tableau blows me away, because I mean, Tableau is built on a proprietary SQL engine. Okay, sure. But Tableau is very well documented online pretty much. And so maybe with Tab Next, I would expect it to be wrong, but I'm amazed at where it tries to give me generic-ish type SQL answers when I really need the proprietary version that's pretty much documented out there. So you got to be that domain expert that's going to be validating everything that it gives you. All right, that's incredibly important. So when you're using the Gen AI, you're going to be needing to decide up front what is the task that you're trying to do and which one is a good matcher for what it is you're trying to get to. Now, if you haven't had a lot of time to practice it, I would just offer that these are a collection of thoughts of what you could do with it that me or one of my family members has done in probably the last 24 hours. And the one that makes me laugh the hardest is the one right here. I have a 26-year-old son who came to Australia with me for the Visit Sydney, and he'll set things out on the counter, take a picture of it, and put into his prompt, use these ingredients, give me the proportions that need to be made to achieve this flavor palette. So really practice from the sublime to the ridiculous, and then you get to be sharper and sharper with the types of prompt engineering that you're capable of doing. So just knowing all along, it still can be confidently wrong. Now, how that applies to our job hunts, there are things that are going to be doable and what will work for it being in a job market, and things that will not work, right? So checking on debugging assistance, learning new programming languages, having it write a tutorial, code optimization has become more and more popular. Again, not necessarily always correct, but it is a conversation you can have with an LLM. Then on the soft skills side, getting it to assist with your resume. Now, I started a new job last spring, and our marketing department is using Gen AI for some of the blogs. And I actually ended up putting together guidelines for how to sound more human while using Gen AI, because you just can't, you'll get downgraded by the search engines for one thing, but especially when it's so important and it's going in to represent you as an applicant into a job circumstance, be so careful not to let those signature things that are screaming this was generated by a bot be on your resume, cover letter, whatever documentation is traveling between you and the company that you're applying for. I have, as a university professor, I have gotten to where I open it, and within a few seconds I can tell you whether or not it's Gen AI, and I will just sit and my students know. I tell them, because I tell them to use Gen AI in the class. If it looks like it's fully authentic from a Gen AI engine, I just send it back and say try again, because yes, we need to practice. We need to be good at this and articulate our questions more fully and get as much value out of this as we can, because in market, the rate of without compromising quality, the rate of production has changed. We are having to do more with less time and less resource. However, you still have to make sure that you've got that domain expertise, you've validated it, you're making it make sense in the context of the business environment that you're in. So there's ways to use it and things that you can't make it do. So for better, for worse, it can still be confidently wrong. And it's so interesting. I was chatting with a friend who's been in industry for about 25 years over Christmas. He was telling me how that he's got a subscription to a different one than I do. And he was talking about how that for syntax and strategy, and it'll tell him what the answer, and then he'll correct it because he knows this tech better than that engine does. And then you go, oh yes, of course, you're so good. Like, it's flattering him along the way. I think it's Copilot that he was using for that. But in any case, just know that whatever you submit to wherever it's going, there are ways for us to know if you've generated it 90% or more with Gen AI. And so use it with caution, right? Let it be a flavor enhancer. Don't let it be core. All right. Now back to the interview and them observing you. You got to think about, what are they observing, right? What are they seeing when they're interacting with you? And we talked about some logic skills, ability to communicate, problem solving, resourcefulness. Yes, of course, right? And these days, your paper is going to say that you absolutely can do all that, right? That's going to be resoundingly answered by the materials that you submit. The part of it that's so kind of a wild card, that is a place for you to really do well and really succeed if you are great under pressure. Except the one part about, well, we all have physical responses to pressure, right? And the more pressure that there is on to get back to work, to get that job, or I really would rather be doing this versus that, that can kind of feel its way out in how we respond. This was an exercise that we did in the PayPal group a while back. Just know that sometimes your body may react before the logic catches up. One of my other friends that is performing musician, he talks about how that the body doesn't necessarily know the difference between excitement and anxiety. I don't know about that, but it is, let's just embrace it for a moment. And the fact of the matter is, your body may respond in a way that is unexpected, and you just need to be thinking about that in advance, that may happen, and just decide to translate it as excitement. Okay. I think that is a really productive way to frame it internally. And just know that going into an interview, more than likely, at some point, you're going to get asked a question these days, especially because there's so many parts and pieces, right? You're probably going to be asked a question you don't know. All right. So what are you going to do when you don't know? If you can pre-decide and kind of like map it out in your mind, like a logic path, this is the path I'm going to go down when I don't know what they're asking me. All right. And this is beyond the point where you've clarified the question and restated it back to them. Okay. But that is where you're going to want to start for sure. This little section here in the middle that's blue, green, and then brown, that's what I'm specifically asking you to consider. And this was a game changer for my group in 2021, and in many cases since then, because you want to stay in the conversation. And the fact of the matter is, in our industry, things are always on the move. So it's not about, do you know everything? That's impossible. Okay. So can you be articulate? Can you stay on your feet? Can you stay conversational about the things that matter? All right. So first things first, if I don't know what's being asked and I need to come up with an answer, I'm going to restate that question. I'm going to ask a clarifying question. I'm going to choose something along those lines, depending on the circumstance I'm in. All right. I'm listening to it, listening real closely. The next step is I'm going to connect to any part that I do understand. All right. And to keep from sounding like, oh yeah, I know that, and say something that's like not really related, but just ask if it's connected to this other part that you have experienced. Okay. And then often that will unlock more information. The person will be telling you some information there, unlock some details. You may then have a memory like, oh my gosh, that's exactly, and then you're off to the races. All right. If you get to the bottom of all of that and you still don't know, well, then ask about it. All right. It's a chance to learn something. It shows that you're not going to just fold. You're going to be resourceful. You're going to, like, in the face of not knowing, you're going to have an answer of like, well, let me learn. And if nothing else, you learn something that day, right? But pre-deciding a logic path in your brain of these are the steps I'm going to take when I'm boxed in and I don't know what to say. All right. Then your body doesn't have as much wiggle room on, shutting down, making you tremble, whatever your body does. Everybody's body is a little different, right? But those things that the body might express before the logic kicks in, even if you framed it as body's excited, it's good news, not bad news. All right. But this can help. I have seen this work 100 times or more of people that were in tough circumstances. You just pre-decide, here's the path I'm going to go down when I don't know how to answer this question. All right. And all this to be being said, we're trying to be conversational. We're trying to assume the best. All right. Even if it's so much more about what you project than what the reality of it is. Even if they are trying to weed you out, so to speak, project the best. Believe the best. All right. And then always remember that overstatement, man, what a slippery slope that is. And only you can give your integrity away. So you want to be sure and stay in your lanes of what you feel strongly about. But knowing that we're in an industry that's in constant state of change, constant motion, always something new. So the possibility of there being something fresh that you don't know, some other tool that is similar but different, it's very, very likely. So having some of your pre-thinking on, here's how I'm going to handle it when I don't know. These are the things I'm core strong on, and I can bridge to those things. 3 B's of interview prep. So building mental toughness, right? Who knew, right? It's almost like a job unto itself to be able to do well with interviews. Practicing on the asynchronous platforms gives you a chance to time box yourself, and get your mind into that. Quickly, I'm going to generate something. Building those reflexes, setting time goals. Today, I'm going to do it in 10 minutes. Tomorrow, I'm going to do it in 8 minutes, whatever that might be. And then broadening your hearing and ability to translate what's asked. That's part of the reason why HackerRank, Lemur, this is a site in a minute I'm going to get to, a couple of places where anywhere you can go to hear questions asked where they're maybe asked poorly, not asked like what you wish they were said, but it gives you a chance to hear it and digest it and do well against it, regardless of it being like the right question or perfectly done. So a few more little closing comments here from recent interviews. The coding without autocomplete, got to do that. You got to practice like that. The undisclosed dialects or versions of environments. I mentioned that person in particular that this has come up over and over since then. The panels of team members with more rounds than historically normal, that just can be unsettling, but it is very much people trying to test you out to see if you're a good fit and if they're going to like working with you. Another recent experience that produced a recommendation of evangelizing your craft. If you're talking to people who aren't in analytics, they're stakeholders or they're in adjacent departments, that's cross-functional, this is a good time for you to tell them why it's a good thing that they're bringing you in. All right. So analytics, we are supposed to be problem solvers, right? We make a difference. We save money. We help reveal opportunities. We help solve problems. There's a chance for you to be human and talk a little bit about that. And then you got to be a little more patient in the waiting sometimes. The length of time to get to that last step varies greatly, but it can be painful, and I appreciate that. All right, so resources. For SQL in particular, if it's been a little while, especially if you're in visual analytics and it's been a minute since you've doubled down on what your vocabulary for it is, you remember that there's window functions, but not what they do, different types of subqueries. Mode analytics, I'm not really sure how it is that they manage to stay free, but they are free. And they do a really good job of kind of breaking things down in bite sizes without being, it's not a very lengthy description on any one of the concepts. So one of the CTOs I worked for used to talk about how that there's a person who can do a job and then a person who can embrace the vocabulary and the conceptual part of it. And from his point of view, this guy had been around lots of big banks and JP Morgan and such, and he was, very well thought of. So just to let you know that the ability to that next level up is where you also have the conceptual side of it down. So not just the how you get it done, but also the why and why your strategy was and what the options were. So I would practice both of those things, not only the doing, but also the why you're doing it. So under that, HackerRank, I've got a link here, and Data Lemur. What a cool site it is. I'll get to that, come back to that in just a minute. Good to see you, Michael, by the way. Then also Mode Analytics, the logic behind each of the concepts. These are a list of questions. I always rotate this out depending on who I've recently heard them from, but some of the conceptual things that would be, being asked. And then practice with a buddy and take on a persona. Be that distracted interviewer, that aggressive interviewer. Make it so that you're comfortable with different structures, different methods, right? And never doubt the follow-up. It's good. It's really important. You need to not say, I'm still waiting and I'm still, like, people want it. I saw this on LinkedIn the other day, how that they want to know that you've got other choices and that they are competing for you, but you don't want to just be forgotten. So that's a balance, right? All right. So be a part of a community, practice together, encourage each other, and consider colleagues that are part of the DataFam for references, because having strong professional references has become, again, a very big, important thing. So I'm going to say thank you for the listening, and I'll be glad to put those resources from this right here, especially because Data Lemur, this guy, for whatever reason, collects questions from people who have come out of interviews from different companies, etc. Lists the question, lists the dialect of SQL Python or whatever it was, and then also the company that came out of. So it's a fantastic resource for practicing interview questions. Okay. All right. So with that, Chris, I will turn the baton back to you, my friend.
Awesome. No worries. Thank you. Probably the first question, I'll just switch screens anyway, is in the Q&A. Sri had a question saying, can we ask to connect on LinkedIn with the interviewers after the interview, or wait for the entire interview process to be over before connecting with them?
What a good question. I think it's fair game to connect with them as you go through, as long as you have, if you feel like there's some sensitivity to that, I would do it after the interview. First of all, I would do it after you meet them, right? And then if you feel like there's a question about whether or not they would receive that well or not, then you probably need to ask. So that may be a person-to-person thing. I usually will connect with people and I usually recommend it. So, but I do see how that sometimes is sensitive. So, Chris, how would you answer that question?
I don't think I would ever ask, or I don't think I'd ask through the process. I think with a lot of recruiters, as you were saying, sort of building up your professional profile, is you're connected to the recruiter beforehand. I don't think I would actually connect with the interviewer until it was a lot further down the process. But again, it depends on the market. Like, as much as all those tips were valid, in all my interviewing career of getting jobs and landing jobs and stuff, I haven't come across a lot of that stuff you were talking about. I have, and I've got a more formal question, but I'll just preface that with a story that happened a long time before COVID. There was again, in Australia, in Sydney, there was sort of this theme of you had to have a technical Tableau interview. Someone sat beside you and watched you use Tableau to see that you could use Tableau.
Okay.
And I interviewed a person one time, and it was basically find out what their level of Tableau skills are by saying, can you build, just Superstore data? So we all know Superstore data, right? Build a bar graph, build a line graph, build a dashboard, build an action filter, just to see what their level of experience was. And there was always the case of, if you can't do something, just say no. It's fine to say no. We just want you to tell the truth. So if you don't know how to build a bar graph, just let me know. You didn't fail the interview. We just know that you can't build bar graphs or action filters or something. Right. And during that interview, something happened. And way down the track, probably 6 months later, I was talking with another sort of like technical interviewer from another company, and we linked that the person in my interview promised that in Tableau he knew how to do an exploding slice in a pie graph. he just forgotten how to do it. And you know, you can't do exploding slices in Tableau, not very easily, right? And especially not in those days. Maybe so now. But this guy basically failed the interview with me, and then failed a series of other interviews because he just could not quite remember how to do an exploding slice in a pie graph in Tableau. And at that point we go, it's not that you don't remember, that's impossible. Like, can you just
tell
the truth?
There you go.
You know?
Yeah, tell the truth. Yes, exactly, right?
So,
you know,
so
and often if you don't know how, if you describe it, like, especially if you're not, like, if you were on the fence about, is that even possible? I think that I would recommend telling what the steps would be that you would take. What would you do to try to figure that out, right?
Yeah. But that's what we were saying to a lot of people is just tell the truth. Don't make up stories about everything. Just, you know, if there's a certain gap in your knowledge, just be honest and say, I don't know how to do that. And I've sort of, even way before that, I used to always say in interviews, I haven't done this before, but I would approach it in this fashion. And then, even though you don't have the experience, people can see that thought process that you would take to finish that challenge, or whatever it was.
Right.
Sort of leading into the other question I was going to ask you is more for Tableau roles. How would you evaluate dashboard design skills?
How would you evaluate design skills?
Yeah. So how would you recruit? How would you interview a Tableau person these days?
Oh man. So my experience with visual analytics, in terms of, there's usually two classes of people. There's the logic people, and then there's our creatives, right? And like putting people together in group projects, I'm always trying to blend those together, because my logic people will give me some really amazing level of detail or calculated fields or something, but their stuff isn't necessarily going to look great. Whereas the design person is going to be the one that paid attention to them when we talked about color theory and layout, and how people's, you know, and I have to wonder if this isn't more connected to an analog clock, but there has been a couple of times where Tableau's done a eye tracking survey or studies with goggles and such. And, you know, the initial feedback was that people swing around top left at, you know, like a clock, but we now have a generation that's not seen any analog clock. So I'm not sure if that actually is so valid right now, but in any case, so how would it evaluate design is what I probably would give them a couple of dashboards and ask them to critique them, to be fair. Because I think trying to put people on the spot and design, there's too much pressure on that moment to really get people's best, especially creatives. Whereas a creative would be very able to look at stuff and go, okay, well, here's what's wrong with this or that, you know what I mean? So that's something I would probably do. Yeah.
And then obviously flipping that round, that's a good skill to practice, is practice critiquing design, and sort of, you know, not badly critiquing, just how would you improve on this? I was doing something online the other day, and I said, when you build a dashboard, you have to think how the user looks at it, not how you look at it. You know, you're the developer, you know what it does. A user coming in for the very first time, what do they see? Like, how are they going to use it?
Especially in the immersives, one of the very first icebreakers I would use, it was to give people, 10 minutes. Okay, find something that is a great example of visual portrayal of data, and one that is a bad, and then tell me why, and then we have a discussion, and invariably that would lead further down the pike to then also, what are we going to do to improve? What could be done to improve this? Because often younger members of the data community haven't seen a lot of stuff. So this is part of why Tableau Public is so important, because you got to have a regular digest of seeing data portrayed that way beyond just charts and tables, you know, so that you know what's possible, the art of the possible, and you know what's effective, not effective. You know why pie charts shouldn't be included. No, I'm just kidding. But, you know, like whatever it is, you know, for those of us who cut our teeth on coding, especially even more so, because I need to not only develop an opinion, I need to know what I can do in a time budget that's going to be effective for what's being asked for. So that's going to usually mean some shortcuts somewhere in there too, you know. So no, I think you have to consume a lot of it, and then make sure that you're following some people who are kind of gold standards I don't know if you remember Viz Candy, but I used to have a couple of folks that I would refer to people all the time, and still do, but especially in the teens, we had some real outliers of people who just did incredible good work. It was a blend between benefit for the business and visual appealing.
Mm-hmm. Anne, did you want to ask your question?
Oh, sure. No problem. So how do you feel about candidates, going back to the question about connecting on LinkedIn with interviewers, how do you feel and what's your take on candidates or potential candidates who reach out about a job posting? You've never met them, you've never heard of them, they're reach out on LinkedIn as the first time, and they're asking for you to put them up for the job, recommend them for the job, put them in front of the hiring manager.
Yeah, so there's two things there. One is when back to Chris's comment earlier, I would definitely not do that at all if I was coming in through a recruiter, okay, as a caveat. And then and what you just described, I feel like it's kind of a, I don't know, violation of privacy. I don't know if people do that and have any kind of positive response out of it, but I would be more inclined to find somebody in the organization that is near, like in a department adjacent, someone that I have common LinkedIn with, and ask them to have coffee and chat about, is that environment a good one to work in? And then ask them to take my resume in, than to direct approach a hiring manager. I feel like I don't know, that may just me and the Southern politeness maybe in some degrees, but that just feels like that would be a little aggressive for what I would have for myself. That would be too aggressive. What do you think, Anne? What was your thought on that?
I agree. I mean, every time in my organization that there is a job in my particular group, and I don't list what I'm specifically doing task-wise yet on LinkedIn, but I just have my job title there. People do reach out and they're like, would you be willing to put me up for this job? And I'm like, I'm sorry, here's the careers page. Please apply directly. Yeah. I've had some that have been aggressively, I'd like to have coffee with you or chat with you so that you get to know me, so you will put in my name. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't do that.
Yeah.
So
I saw on LinkedIn.
I think it's a little presumptuous.
Yeah, it is presumptuous. And, I understand that there's a noise level out there right now, but I think that there's other ways to you have to work your network, and you have to build relationships with people and not just work your network, right? Yeah. So that's the being involved in community, serving, volunteering, asking if you can do pro bono work for people. That builds credibility without it being so self-serving and so abrasive. So yeah, it's hard. You just can't.
I feel it. Thanks.
Yeah. It's hard to do a personal reference for someone that you've never worked with, that you don't know how they work.
Right, exactly. No.
Yeah. and I had the opposite, where someone would always use me for a reference. And I was like, I've worked with you, I'm happy to recommend you. And after several years, I went, surely there's someone else you can use that's more recent. Like I was going back, I thought I was going back far too long to say, yes, I work with this person, but it was years ago. I don't know what their current skills are like. I don't know what their current personality at work is like, because it was way back then.
I get the same kind of questions from students, both at the university to refer them to master's programs, and then also people coming out of immersives. And so I've kind of adopted a little bit of a multi-step process where I ask them to tell me what it is about themselves that they feel makes them best suited for this job that they're specifically pointing to, right? So that they have to articulate what they feel like is their winning features or attributes. And also, I'm testing them to see if this is one of 1,000 things to send out, or if this is important to them. So that does it merit my time? And then if it's somebody that I, thought a lot of, and I easily can call to mind, then it's not so hard. If it's somebody that I barely knew, or they didn't come to class a lot, or some of those flaws, right? I'm really more reluctant about it, and going to stick to the facts in terms of like the referral to a master's program. I can talk about that they attended and that this grade or something like that. But, you know, you got to be careful what you ask when you're asking people for references, because, you know, you don't have control of the pen, and you need to be asking something that's reasonable. So.
Yeah, definitely. Another question from Sri. I was wondering if you wanted to ask it himself, but I'll ask instead. The question is, do things like Canva or Figma really get used at work? One common thing
Absolutely.
I hear is some of the dashboards are too flashy and at work,
Yeah.
and only a handful of charts get used.
Right. So the place I work now, Canva's used a lot. Actually, I guess it's more. No, she uses Canva and Figma. Our lead designer, and rather than it being like on first blush, me coming at it from so I was an RMViz judge last year and this year, and so one of the criteria is how much of this is Tableau and how much of it is not, right? Because we're really like aiming to reward people who've really figured out how to do it fully with as much as possible with Tableau. That being said, so that was my mindset going into this job, and then I'm seeing that they're doing these. They have basically developed a library of reusable assets to populate these beautiful dashboards. So even though it may seem flashy, the reality of it is it's faster for her to reuse things that she's already, she and the team have already developed. So I think my judgment may have been a little bit early on that, but there are, you know, like, there's just some things that can be very tastefully done with a template, and because of, you know, the features of Tableau, it's not that hard to implement them. So, you know, everything from a button upgrade to a navigation point upgrade to, you know, the whole template of the background of the dashboard. If it's, you know, and it would really, you got to be careful, because if a job is bid out as X hours, and because you have a propensity to go all out, you're going to over budget it. That means you're going to lose money for your company. You know, there's definitely discretion and a need for it to be able to match the time budget for the amount of time that's budgeted for. So.
Yep. Yeah. And the last question is Devon's question. I think we'll leave that because I don't want to answer that in the recording, if you know what I mean, based on the question. But I'll move on to, I don't think there's any other questions. I'll move on to this because these are all Celia's contact details. Probably the middle one I'm talking about for Devon is LinkedIn. I'm sure Celia doesn't mind connecting on LinkedIn. I don't mind connecting on LinkedIn as well. And we can have more of a private conversation about that. But if that's okay with you, Devon, if you want to ask your question in a more generic frame, you know, feel free now.
Sure, maybe I will ask it as a more generically in
Sure.
case it's interesting to anyone else.
Yep.
So I guess for some background, I haven't interviewed for a while. I've been in a stable job for 7 years, and now I'm back interviewing again. And I feel like last time I went through this, there weren't so many steps in interview processes.
Yeah.
So now I'm interviewing with a company where I've already gone through an initial in-person interview, a technical take-home, and then a technical interview. Now there's an upcoming hiring manager interview after all that. And honestly, I'm just kind of trying to figure out what that could be about, given all the things that have already been covered, which I feel like is most things. I was wondering if you have any advice, Celia, or anyone else.
Yeah. So Devon, is this the first time you will have had a one-on-one conversation with the hiring manager?
Yeah, all the interviews so far have
Okay.
been with other people.
Okay, so maybe this one may not be about are you qualified to get the work done, but more like how will your rapport with this person be? And I think that your questions that you could prepare to take in with you would be differently tuned toward what would the working relationship look like? What kind of reporting does he do? You're going to find out, hopefully you can find out through the questions you'll ask if they're a hands-on manager or if they're a hands-off manager. Did they have 20 direct reports or do they have 5? You know, so much of how you are, I feel like your boss makes your job, unfortunately, for better or for worse. I feel like who you ultimately report to, if they know what you're doing and they advocate for you for resources and they are pleased with the work you're doing, it sets a tone and it helps make the budget keep flowing for your role, right? So if you think about this next step as, I'm going to find out this person who's going to be my advocate in my chair, right? Do I like them? Are they easy to communicate with? What am I going to need to do to communicate well with them? Because you're going to have to do that even if they are, no matter what they are, right? If they are be brief, be brilliant, be gone, or if they all want to hear all the details. There's everything in between those two extremes, right? So you need to match how they receive information. And so this is a chance for you to discover a lot of that and kind of conceptualize how is that going to work for me and is that going to be possible. I got laid off one time a few years ago where the CEO and the COO were telling me, appreciate your work, blah, blah, blah. Fortunately, you have to eliminate your job. Just take the morning and think about it. Well, I was in a classroom that morning delivering material that I had written. No one else knew. I mean, like, clearly my boss had not let them know that I was not just leading a team, but I was doing the work as well. Or I was just such a miss on understanding someone advocating for what I was doing with my time, where that was going. So like, you need to learn that stuff. And if you can learn a little bit of it before you get there, maybe I'm over answering the question, but I just wanted to, that's a huge important interview right there, what you got coming up.
No, that's really useful.
Chris,
thank you.
Chris, you pile on, please.
And I think the same as Anne's saying in the chat as well, it feels more like a soft skills thing than a hard skills thing. Like you've done the technical skills. If you're actually still progressing through interviews, I hate when people go, oh, I've been on like 5 interviews over the last 8 weeks. I'm like, can the company make a decision or not? But if you're progressing further and it's a different, you're sort of onto a different subject, I'd probably treat that as being positive. But also it's a different tack on the angle. So it could be, coming down to, working conditions, expectations, etc. Hopefully after that.
Good.
And even one of my questions on that might be, and what's the rest of the interview process? Like, when can I expect a result on this process as well?
Yeah. And we recently relaunched the San Francisco Tech. And the speaker was, she was head of customer analytics and data science at Intuit, and she had chosen to go there as she's, talking about her career progression. So she's talking about how that she chose to go there because the executives and especially her manager that she was reporting to had been there a long time. And she just described how that from her point of view, that longevity meant that they had been able to adapt, try new things, have them work out however they worked out, but then adapt. And, like that survivability of mistakes, you hear what that's. And so like, if you have a chance to talk to the hiring manager without it being all about your tech skills, then there's just so much more you can learn. And, and it sounds like you're the kind of person who stays in their seat for a while. So, finding out if that person's been in their seat for a while and what is it taking to stay in their seat, right? That sort of stuff.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Awesome. I think that's all the questions. We'll move on to, I'm just conscious of time, but the same thing, if people need to leave, they can leave, that's fine. So all Celia's contact details and different ways to contact her, obviously LinkedIn, websites and places where she works, Tableau Public, or sorry, I can't even remember what the thing is, but USFCA, University of San Francisco, California.
Yeah, California,
yeah. Okay, so survey time for everyone else that's still here, which is good. So let's move on to Mentimeter. If everyone's got their phones.
I love Mentimeter. Well done, Chris.
And you scan the QR code and you go to the website. Or if you've got the Menti app, you can just enter the code. Next slide. Just where you live, state and country, so we know where people are from. Obviously, don't fill in your full address because we don't need to know that.
I love Mentimeter. This is really fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The word cloud's a good word. It sort of pops up like that as well. It's just like, okay, cool.
It's beautiful, yeah.
So again, a good range, but basically Australia or the US. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Another trick question. And for the regular attendees, yes, the first three questions are the same three questions. And then there'll be 5 questions that are different, and then there's a trick question at the end.
I started to try to pre-ask you about the trick question. I heard you say that, and I thought, oh.
It's not that much of a trick question. It's just not what you would usually expect. I hope.
Okay, that's fair.
But again, this question just proves that Tableau is used everywhere, right? So that's good.
Yeah.
Maybe we had one person drop out. Let's move on to the next slide. How many years have you been using Tableau? And this one either skews one way or the other way, and I can never tell the difference between. Okay, cool. So a lot of veterans, if we like, using Tableau for more than 9 years. Okay, now there's the different questions. What do you think is the most overused Tableau feature?
Overused.
Superstore is the most overused feature. Sure.
Yeah, I've been surprised at how resistant people are to learning with Superstore these days.
Sorry, resistant?
In my world, people are becoming. I feel like that's a mischaracterization of the purpose of Superstore, because it's sort of like the common language, so we don't have to use proprietary data.
I've also seen people come off normal Tableau training and they didn't learn anything because they only use Superstore and we're not a retail organization. Right.
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah,
but
right.
you've got to just look at it as if it's data. And yes, it's not your data, but it's sort of something close. But yeah, people just have this locked-in mindset that if they go to a training course and we're using retail data, Tableau can only be used in a retail setting, right? And you've got to try and undo that as well.
Yeah. I see that comment from Anne about the coffee chain. I used to use Divvy Bikes from Chicago a lot, Boston Bikes. San Fran changed their naming system too often, so I couldn't use them, but also Airbnb and some other stuff. So we could approximate different industries, because you're right about that. E-commerce.
Yeah.
Yeah. Retail.
There's plenty of data out there if you go and look for it. Okay, next question. When exploring data in Tableau, do you feel more like a detective, an artist, or a builder?
I think the OG founders would hope we were being detectives, right?
Yeah, but it just sort of, I think the feelings change over the years as well. So next question. What's your favorite thing about using Tableau? So the most overused feature is show me, but the most favorite thing is show me. Is that the same person or not? I don't know. Flexibility, obviously leading there as well.
Yeah.
Next question. If you could give one piece of advice to a Tableau newbie, what would it be? Attend tugs. Makeover Monday practice. That's always a good one.
Yeah, workout Wednesdays are also good. You know, so much of this right here is about getting digesting more, right? You know, we were talking earlier about evaluating visual. Well, until you've seen a few thousand, I mean, how do you even have an opinion yet?
Yeah.
Yeah, data description is big. I think data descriptions and knowing the data well going forward is going to take a new role, because especially with Tableau Next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you need the description so that AI can understand what the data is, so that the AI can help, right? If you don't have the descriptions, then the AI is going to get things wrong because it just has
Correct.
Perfect. I think we're up to the hardest question ever. Oh no, second last question. When teaching Tableau to others, what do you focus on first?
I like that. Blue versus green.
dimension versus measures, blue versus green.
Yeah, I think Andy Kriebel just recently did a lesson on blue versus green that
Yep.
was double blocked on my calendar with a customer thing, so I didn't get to see it yet, but it's gotten a lot of positive feedback.
Yeah, it's that foundational building block that if you get it
Mhm.
wrong, you're just going to be struggling for far too long.
Yeah. I always talk about how that Power BI has an easier start, but it fizzles out sooner, whereas Tableau, you have these terms, navigation, and way of thinking that is like the Tableau way. You get past that, you're off to the races in the most
Yeah.
profound, expansive kind of way. But if you don't nail the basics, it's going to be frustrating.
Yep. Yeah, you're going to be stuck quite quickly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that's the 5 questions. Maybe I've counted to 5 properly this time. The tricky question. Who would you like to see present at a future TUG meeting?
You know, when you had Andy here in December, did
Yep.
you guys agree on a part 2?
We agreed on a part 2. We haven't finalized the date yet. I've got all the content because it was just the questions that we didn't get to before. So all the answers are going to be Andy Cochran.
Have you spoken at one?
Sorry?
Have you spoken at one of these?
No, well, I host it. So what would I present on?
No, you speak all the time. So you do this too. I know you.
Someone's going to sit in as a host so I can present at my, because how do I introduce myself? But yes.
There you go. There you go. I bet we would have a number of volunteers for that.
I don't think I need to.
love-
Look, there's so many votes for Andy, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, that was, Anne says she's presented at her own tag recently. Good for you, Anne. That's awesome.
Yes, but promoting Anne's TUG. Anne leads a TUG with 2 other people. It's the Data Plus Women US West Coast, if I'm right.
West Coast. Mhm.
There's links on YouTube that we're just about to talk about as well. So it's easy to sort of step back a little bit while you present. I can't do that, but that's okay. You know, I'm only joking. If I actually need to present, I can, but I'd rather fill up the agenda with other people. So we'll move on. The next TUG meeting is Harim in about 10 days' time. So we've got a nice break between now and the next meeting. But talking all about Tableau, MCP, AI, Tableau, Streamlit, etc., that sort of things. But MCP is when AI is talking to AI. So again, go back to the user group website or grab the QR code straight away, or all those details will be online as well. This and every other meeting we do, because it's the whole point of the TUG, is recorded, put on YouTube, along with a lot of other TUGs. So if you go to YouTube at Team DataFam, there's a whole heap of different TUGs. They've all got different playlists. All the English-speaking TUGs are on Spotify and Apple as well, so you can listen to the podcast as well. When I say English-speaking TUGs, the Brazil TUGs on there, the Norwegian TUGs on there, there's a few foreign language TUGs. I watch them because you just go onto YouTube, turn on the subtitles and just read the subtitles, and you can still learn things even when you don't understand the language. So it's really good. Sorry?
No, it's a really good point. Great recommendation.
If anyone wants to get in touch, just email me at team.datafam@gmail.com. But again, thank you, Celia. I know we went way over. It's good to get that content. Again, people can come back and watch the recording at any time in the future. But thank you for your time today. It was great to see that presentation.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay. Thanks a lot, guys.
Bye-bye.